Greetings and salutations, YouTube land. It is your buddy Choppadong coming at you with the NFL version of ChopTalk, brought to you by the one, the only DFSArmy.com, your one-stop shop for all things DFS, MMA, PGA, NFL, MLB. We've got it all covered for you. Go down to the comments section, click the like, click the subscribe, keep the content coming, and become a VIP. Trigger all of the content, tools, coaching, everything that we have inside DFS Army, because honestly, it's the only community that is hell-bent on making you a better player. We will spend as much time as you want us to spend with you. All you have to do is be the squeaky wheel. You come inside, you start tagging our coaches, you start asking questions. We will give you honest feedback. We will dig in and share everything that we've learned along the way and make you a better player too. We focus on the fundamentals. We've got content all over the place coming at you this week inside DFSArmy.com for NFL Week 1. Let's dive in and let's talk a little main slate. I'm going to try and break this down really quick. I am not a deep diving guru. I am the guy that gets you pointed in the right direction. And the first thing that I'm going to actually do is show you where you can find the wishbone, because the wishbone, if you go to DFSArmy.com, come over to the NFL tab, you've got a research station here, you've got podcasts, you've got all sorts of stuff that you can be looking at, but the articles page where we've got VIP podcast for the main slate, for the showdown slates, for everything. We've got tiered GPPs on Fanduel. We've got draw plays, which is focused a little bit more on wide receiver and cornerback matchups. We've got the showdown slate written down, chalk donkeys, where you want to go as far as where the chalk's going to go and where you might want to consider going. Here is the wishbone. My favorite first look article of the week, of course, because I write it, but hopefully it points you in the right direction. Let's open it up. Take a little look in case you haven't seen it and haven't ever read it before. What we're going to do with the wishbone is start with the Vegas odds table and start getting a look. And that's what I'm going to show you here as we walk back and forth between games. I may dive into the NFL research station here and show you all of this sexiness of all of these stats for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, defensive matchups, etc. But I'm also doing, if you've looked back through, not necessarily the wishbone, but through the NFL articles, if you've looked back through there, you've found a article that I wrote that kind of has a bunch of little miniature podcasts in it, breaking down how we look for quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, etc. And what I plan to do today is kind of walk through the games, mention some of those players that I liked as I was mixing and matching with some of the lineup combinations that I'm tweaking with. And my thoughts will probably change between here and Sunday again, multiple times. But right now, this is kind of what I like, kind of where I'm going, and a little bit, it's just who I like. I'm not going to bury you with a bunch of numbers and bury you with a bunch of theory and whatever, other than maybe some game script, game flow that should point us in the right direction and a little bit of what I've read. You're going to find you can become inundated with NFL content if you want by reading everything out there from all of the free content sites and all the premium content sites. And believe me, I'm doing it too. But I try to formulate my opinions first and then use other people for a little bit of validation or a little bit of, that made a lot of sense. Maybe I ought to look at that. And then sometimes that player will climb up my rankings list and make him more of a priority for me the more I do that. But what I'm going to try and do now is go through and mention the high points of the games that you should be focused on and the players within those games that you should be focused on to hopefully get you off to the best start. I did my top threes, my top 3 games to target: Tampa Bay, Houston, Kansas City. That's not all the games I'm targeting. Quarterbacks, Brady, Cousins, Breeze, not all of the quarterbacks I'm targeting. Running backs, of course, not all of the running backs that I'm targeting. They're not even all on the main slate. This was Thursday through Monday. Tight ends, etc., etc., etc. By the way, if you're a sports bettor, you've got to do the beat the bookie. These guys are winning at a 65% clip since we've debuted the site, and that is beating the rake that is making profit for all of the members. You need to use coupon code CHOP there too, but come inside the wishbone, click that link. I may throw it in the link to this video, because if you do parlays and you do teasers and you do all that kind of stuff, these guys have a very data-driven approach that actually helps with a model and everything, helps point out exactly where you should be investing your money. It's actually, if I was a sports bettor, it's the first place I would go. Defenses, and then the free roll. We have a fantasy draft free, remember? Free, no money, zero, zip, free of charge to you. $1,000 added swag bags to the top 3. Right now it's sitting on about 400 or 500 people, but it's a max of 2,000 people. We're trying to get it filled. We could use your help. Click the link inside the wishbone and go get in there. It's free, man. While you're there, there's a 5-week survivor. $5 only for VIPs, I believe, inside DFS Army. So another reason to become a VIP, where 70% get knocked out every single week, and it cuts down after 5 weeks to the top 50 people or so, and they're going to all get paid. That's how we do it inside DFS Army. We've also got a lot of VIP type contests set up throughout the season that are going to reward our members, because obviously you guys invest in us. We want to invest back in you. GPP plays, NFL breakdown video. This is going to go right in there when we're done, but we're not done. I'm going to start dropping the other content in the end of this article too. So what I want you to do is I want you to go find the wishbone on the NFL tab. I want you to bookmark it. I will obviously include that link inside this video, but I want you to bookmark it. I want you to read it. I want you to tell me what you think, what you would like to see, maybe what you don't want to see. Maybe we'll tweak it and we'll cater it towards you guys, the loudmouths, that do a lot of talking out on Twitter and out on YouTube and whatever else, and we'll get it the way you like it. Game number 1. Thursday game, you know what? Not a big fan of it. I think this game is a little bit interesting. If you play the Thursday through Monday slates, that's fine. And if you play the showdown, of course, you have to play a lot of goofy plays out of this thing to make it work. But if you're playing this particular big Thursday through Monday slate, I think the only player on there is probably Nelson Aguilar that I would use. I like Mohamed Sanu. I like Julio Jones. But I don't like the situation that they're going up against necessarily. And what I'm looking for when I'm looking for games to target is, I mean, you're going to see some spot plays here and there, but I'm generally looking for stuff where I know where the spread is going to go. I lean on Vegas a little bit. Everybody in the world does. And I see implied team totals. I lean on these more than even the over-under. Implied total of 22 is not all that great. I mean, we already know that they're going to feature Matt Ryan, Devonta Freeman, Tevin Coleman, some Sanu, the tight end Hooper possibly, and Julio Jones. Julio Jones, if they're only going to score 3 touchdowns, I don't know that Julio Jones is going to get 2 of them. Mohamed Sanu is generally a cash game player with a lower ceiling, and I'm trying to focus more this year on not taking guys with high floors and no ceiling. I'm trying to take guys with high floors and high ceilings. And honestly, Julio Jones doesn't have much of a floor. Everybody talks about how consistent the guy is, how dominant he is, how great he is. I think the dude's overrated like crazy, because he gets forgotten. Yeah, he's a red zone target. Yeah, he drops passes. You know, he only scored, 3-4 touchdowns or so last year. This is a big down year for the guy. And yeah, he may be primed for a bounce back, but I don't think he's worth the price that you have to pay to get him. Now, he's going to have a couple of big games this year. There's no doubt. He's got the talent. But I'm not going to be disappointed 14 times for him to reward me twice, unless I'm playing giant GPPs with him, in which case he's always in play. But if I'm talking cash games, leagues, small 1,000, 2,000 person GPPs, I honestly don't need to take a shot on him too often, because I don't need to take that kind of risk to win a 2,000 person GPP. I've proven that with myself that I can do that with cash games. Cash game type lineups, as long as they've got a high floor and a lot of upside. And I need the floor that Julio doesn't deliver for the price tag. Nelson Aguilar does, though, especially as the wide receiver 1. Nick Foles might be favoring him. He's going to be somebody that should factor in for quite a bit of targets. I don't know where that running freaking committee crap is going. I mean, I think we're leaning on Jay Ajayi, but I need to kind of wait and see on that a little bit. Zach Ertz, fine, but Atlanta actually held down tight end production a little bit last year from what I read, so I'm not super high on Zach Ertz, and to be honest with you, I'm not even on this slate to begin with. I'm just pointing out that I would be focused on Nelson Aguilar of anybody. That'd be probably the only player I'd play. Pittsburgh and Cleveland. This one's very, very interesting. The reason why I would say this is you've got a decent spread favoring Pittsburgh 4.5. You might want to check the money line. It may have changed again since last night. I think that money line's been creeping a little bit closer. I think Vegas or the betting public is starting to give Cleveland a little bit of love. Cleveland at the implied total of 20.5. Pittsburgh at 25. Again, not a super high scoring game. Pittsburgh's on the road to open the season. Now, I will say that I looked up their past 5 games, and Pittsburgh has done okay against Cleveland. But where are we going to go with Cleveland's brand new roster? You know, I'm not looking at Tyrod. I'm not looking at Mixon. I'm not looking at really many of these guys, even Jarvis Landry, because I just don't see the implied total being high enough for me to enjoy it. What I do see is I see some Pittsburgh. Of course, Antonio Brown is the guy. How he's going to have a big game, I don't know, but he's probably going to. He's got a high floor. His ceiling is not maybe as high in this particular matchup as it usually is, but it's always up there in outlier performances. And 100 times if we ran this slate, he might test his ceiling, 10 to 20 times, not 30 or 40 times like you might normally expect, but he will test it. He has that in him, that 180 yards and 2 touchdowns GPP winning week in any single night, any single game, any single matchup. What I'm concerned about is Ben Roethlisberger and his home road splits. We know he's not as good on the road as he is at home. So I'm concerned about that bringing down Antonio Brown too. I'm a little concerned about Le'Veon Bell still holding out, and what that's going to do for me is get me on the backup Connor. I think that I know that if the backup is the number one running back, dude's $5,000 on Fanduel, dirt ass cheap. He's going to be a lock. He's the kind of lock. There's good chalk and there's bad chalk. There's chalk you have to take and chalk you can kind of fade. And he's the kind of chalk you have to take. I'm sorry. All formats, he just has to kind of be one of your, on the 1 p.m. slate, on the Thursday, Monday, whatever, on the main slate, he just kind of has to be the kind of chalk. Because he's going to get, 17, 18 touches, couple of targets in the passing game, and at $5,000, he has to basically just, shoot himself in the foot. He has to Plaxico himself in order to not bring value. It's not going to be that hard to hit. If he falls into the end zone getting a little bit of goal line work, he's going to obviously bring value. And you're going to have that because 75 to 80% of the world is going to have it. You absolutely have to have it in cash. You can consider fading it a little bit in GPPs. Now, if you do like I do and you make a couple of different cash lineups, let's say you make 3, you can fade him in 1. Because honestly, here's where this backfires. I ran a couple of years ago Devonta Freeman, and it blew my mind. He was in a lock smash spot, and I just was like, you know what, F it. I'm going to throw caution to the wind. I'm going all in on the dude. Bam, first quarter concussion. See ya. Every lineup I put out there, toast. Just tanked. And I learned my lesson. You don't ever go all in the NFL. 75%, 80% max of your lineups because concussions happen. And in today's era, with all of the protocol and everybody going into those little blue tents, you never know when it's going to happen. If it happens in the first half on a $5,000 running back, it doesn't necessarily kill your chances to cash in cash games because everybody has him. But imagine the leverage you gain in GPPs if you just have 2 live bodies accumulating points at the running back spot throughout the rest of the day. You run an Ezekiel Elliott and a David Johnson, and the next thing you know, you're blowing past people in the leaderboards, and it would be one of those where if he gets concussed in the first quarter, he probably is not in the GPP winning lineup. Therefore, it does make sense to fade him. I just think he needs to still be in the majority of your lineups. If I look at who else, Juju Schuster, nah. Tight ends, nah. Mostly because of Big Ben. I think Antonio Brown is safe. I know that Connor is great. If Le'Veon Bell gets the start, he's Le'Veon Bell. He's a GPP play, but I don't think he's a cash play because they were real easy on him last year going into the first couple weeks of the season. And on top of that, I just don't know that he's in game shape yet anyway. And if he doesn't, get paid, he's not going to be happy about it anyway, and that's going to be in the back of his head. So if you want to play all those theories, those narratives, I don't think that this would be the week. Maybe in next week or the week after, we can start running Le'Veon in cash again because dude's going to get his numbers, throughout the year. Move down to Minnesota and San Francisco. San Francisco goes into Minnesota, 5.5 point spread in favor of Minnesota, home team. Low total here on San Francisco. That actually brings the Minnesota defense into play. They're not being talked up like they should be. Last, Chris Raybon or Evan Silva, one of them tweeted out, last 10 home games for Minnesota's defense, they haven't allowed 20 points. And in fact, they've pitched a 7-point game a couple of times. So they're going to not allow a lot of points, maybe take the ball over. San Francisco and Garoppolo, if they happen to be turnover prone, it's going to fall right in the hands of Minnesota. I think it's a great defense, a great pivot off of what will be the Baltimore Ravens. But quite honestly, it's definitely worth looking at. At a 26 total, I think that you can get a little bit of action with the Minnesota offense. I think Kirk Cousins is fine. I think Kyle Rudolph is great. I think that Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, I think they're fine. I think Dalvin Cook is fine. I don't know. You're going to have to look up DVOA or DVP type numbers because San Francisco may have handled the run a little bit. Dalvin Cook did not make my core, but he's on my list, and I'll have GPP exposure to him for sure. I just wonder a little bit about his floor and ceiling this week, but I'm definitely excited to see what he can do. And I think that I know that the guy has the talent. I just want to see all of the numbers. And I don't want to see them ease him into the situation a little bit and use Latavius Murray on the goal line and vulture off a few touchdowns or any of that kind of crap. And I'm a little bit worried about that this week. So I want to see how that kind of plays out. That said, he should be okay most weeks. I've got him in my season-long team, and of course I'm starting him. Cincinnati I'm not really using any of the San Francisco guys. I may use, if I used a Keenum, Rudolph stack, I may run it back with Pierre Garçon, but Garçon's never been much of a factor in the red zone's the problem. And I'm not on Breda. I'm not on Freddie Morris, whatever. Those are deep, deep GPP flyers that I just have no interest in personally. Garcon might be the only San Francisco 49er I might use. I don't see this game shooting out in tough Minnesota defense at home to use Garoppolo or anything. Garcon would only be garbage time, short route type stuff when the defense is given all that stuff underneath, and you might rack up a lot in the fourth quarter. So if he's only sitting on 6 points or something going in to the fourth quarter, don't be too disappointed if they're down 7 or 10 points or so, because Minnesota might start giving a lot of the underneath stuff anyway, and he might rack up some yards. If you know anything about garbage time, it benefits the wide receiver getting the work a lot faster than the quarterback. Quarterback gets a little bit of a bump, but generally are going to still lock down inside the red zone and try and keep you out of the red zone, but they're going to let you march between the 20s. And when you get a quarter point per yard in passing and whatever it is, it's a point per 10 or a point per 25. Point per 25 for quarterbacks, that's not racking up yards or points as fast as a point per 10 yards and half a point per reception or a full point on DraftKings for the receiver. He's getting 1 to 1.5 points every time, or 2 to 2.5 points every time he crosses the 10-yard mark. And he gets a 30-yard pass and it's a 4.5 point play. Or a 4-point play over on DraftKings, 3.5 on Fanduel. You get my point. That benefits the receivers a lot faster than the quarterbacks. So don't necessarily take quarterbacks on garbage time in that theory that you've heard before. Take the wide receiver instead. Run it back against the stack that got the home team there. In this case, maybe a Thielen and a Cousins, or a Rudolph and a Cousins, or something like that. I don't know if the game's going to shoot out enough and support enough to run Thielen and Rudolph and Cousins and Garcon, but stranger things have happened in large field GPPs. Next game's kind of a dud. Indianapolis, Cincinnati. Don't even need to talk about it outside of maybe AJ Green. I'm not on any of the running backs. I'm not on the tight ends. I'm not on really any of this baloney. At 46 total is interesting with the 26 in Indianapolis, but still, I'm looking for low totals to trigger a defense against. It doesn't get any lower than Buffalo this week. So when I look at Buffalo at Baltimore, Baltimore's going to be a chalk defense. What are they, like third in takeaways or something like that last year? They're at home. They're favored by a ton. Buffalo's going to have to pin their ears back without Tyrod, who wasn't too turnover prone. They're going to have to pin their ears back and just start chucking it at some point. To who? Can you name, if you don't live in Buffalo, can you name Buffalo receivers? I don't think I can. And on top of that, I'm not worried about anybody other than Charles Clay on the Buffalo side of the football. Look, Sean McCoy is fine, but Baltimore might be able to game plan him out into, where he doesn't have much of a ceiling. He'll have a floor just on workload alone. But the bottom line is the 16 under 17 is a monster low total, and it plays right into the hands of the Baltimore defense. They are your cash game defense, period, end of story. Anything else is getting too fancy. Save the other stuff, the Jacksonvilles, the LA Chargers, the Minnesota Vikings. Save those guys for your GPP lineups, but in cash games, you're just going to want to run the Baltimore offense. It's just too good a spot. Baltimore showing a lower total, even with the 7-point favorite. And I think that obviously when we have heavy favorites and it's showing that they're going to be up as the game winds down, they're going to be icing the clock. And who are they going to be doing that with? The early down back, Alex Collins. I do think there's a chance that Joe Flacco for dirt cheap has an interesting game ahead of him. I think that there's a chance that John the Sheriff Brown, breaks a big play. I do think Michael Crabtree might be targeted in the red zone, but the issue really, those are again GPP type plays outside of Collins. Flacco is a GPP play. The receivers certainly GPP plays because the total is so damn low. It's showing that Vegas seems to think they're a little inept anyway. I don't think they're going to go blow Vegas away and score some 28, 32 points. They might, and if they do, that's why you've got the GPP play in the Flacco John Brown or Flacco Crabtree type scenario. I think your safest play in this game is the defense, which also correlates very, very positively with Alex Collins. They are core plays for me this week, hoping to see Collins get the majority of the workload. Not 100% sure he will, but if the game flow goes his way, he should be getting 4 quarters worth of work at a minimum. Jacksonville at New York. The Giants, 43.5 point total is pretty low. 23.5 on the Jacksonville side. 20 kind of takes a lot of the offenses out of play. I know what you're already thinking, and I'll mention it here in a minute. But the one that I would definitely be considering, obviously the Jacksonville Jaguars defense is a phenomenal GPP pivot off of Minnesota. They're not going to be all that sneaky, to be honest with you. But I think that it's smart. I think that Eli's as turnover prone as they come. And if he has that stupid look on his face in the third quarter and just starts throwing it all over the place, great. I think that on the road, as an underdog, with the game script leaning towards having to play catch up late in the game, unless Saquon Barkley is also the third down back getting all of the receptions, I don't think he's as safe as we want to see him for in cash. Now he's talented. He's another GPP type of play. There's no doubt. But I don't think he's safe enough for cash games. When I look at cash games, I'm generally wanting to take the home team. If I said road dog, I'm sorry. They're at home, obviously. The road team is Jacksonville, but they're road favorites. I think that leans on Leonard Fournette, and I think that's what happened all last year. I think that Fournette is moderately safe. He carries a little bit of risk being on the road, but he carries a lot of safety in being the favorite, and we know how they love to use him, especially if the defense is your GPP winner, your Jacksonville defense and your Fournette running back combo could be a GPP winning type combination this week, because if the defense scores a touchdown or two or gets tackled on the 5 and Fournette has a couple of easy punch-ins, then they're going to work very, very well together like they did last year. I'm not on Bortles. I'm not on any of those. Now, the other chalk guy that I think you're going to see a lot in cash is Keelan Cole, and I think that it's a good idea because he's dirt cheap, but I don't know that Bortles can get him the ball. I don't know that New York is really going to give a lot to the pass, especially if they fall behind fairly early. I think that they're going to have to stop Fournette. And I don't think, now I know he doesn't have to do much at $4,500 or whatever he is, but at the same time, it's a kind of an unsure workload because there's really not. I know they say he is the number one receiver, but it's kind of D.D. Westbrook and even a little bit of Dante Moncrief are in that offense as well. And who's the tight end? I don't remember the tight end, but these are all other guys, and it's Bortles throwing at them. And I don't know that any one of them is going to have some great game. He may test his floor. He may end up eking over his floor, but I don't see any of them having the upside to win a GPP for you, unless they just have a big broken play, which again is fine for large field GPPs where the fluky stuff is what pays. But for smaller stuff where you kind of have to keep your senses about you a little bit, I don't know. I think this is more of a fade type situation. I think it's a solid tournament fade. You may or may not have to take him in cash. That it's going to depend on ownership projections and your sources and which we have at DFS Army anyway. But I think you're going to have to take a peek at that stuff and decide for yourself as to what you want to do in cash. I can find the fade in cash. I can certainly find the fade in tournaments and hope D.D. Westbrook goes off, or hope, now I'm not going to necessarily roster D.D. Westbrook either, but hope that he goes off at lower ownership and it gets away from what might be, high ownership on Keelan Cole in tournaments because he's so cheap again. we've got enough value early in the season. We've got enough value out there that we don't really need to focus on this. If this was week, 12, oh my God, he'd be the kind of chalk you'd be having to take, I'm sure. But it's week one. Everybody's priced down a little bit, especially on FanDuel, and I think you can kind of get away from that and use this as more of an opportunity to fade and still put together a pretty good lineup. If you wanted a GPP pivot, maybe that John Brown up in Baltimore is the guy that could be a decent GPP pivot because he's only about 5,000, 5,200 or so himself. So it's not like you have to be a complete dollar for dollar pivot. When I look at Tampa Bay and New Orleans, of course, this is another chalk game of the week. 9.5-point spread in favor of New Orleans. Again, check the line, make sure it hasn't moved too much. 49.5 on the game total, 20 for Tampa Bay. This game could kind of shoot out. I looked back, and there was only one out of the 5 games that went like 17-10 the last 5 times they've played. But I was really more focused on last year and looking at how the 2 games went in the division rivals last year, because they were, New Orleans made that shift more from Drew Brees throwing a ton to running more, and based on that, the games still were pretty high scoring, and Tampa Bay put up a pretty good fight. So on Tampa Bay side of things, I don't know that you want to trust Fitzpatrick except for large field GPPs, again, where random wins, because I think his chances of being the GPP winner are just very, very low. I'm not going to say they're zero, but I think they're very, very low. I think that Peyton Barber makes a lot of sense, even in some cash games, because if this thing's a shootout, they're using him. It's close, it's competitive, their offense is still fairly balanced. I think that Mike Evans is interesting. I know that New Orleans allows you to run between the 20s, which helps Peyton Barber a ton, and they lock down the pass as much as they can. But Mike Evans has supreme talent, and if this game shoots out and goes 37-30 or something like it has done in the past, Mike Evans should be a factor in that game. Fitzpatrick should be a factor in that game too. So that would bring up your, I don't know, your OJ Howard, Mike Evans, Fitzpatrick stack. Run it back with a Michael Thomas or something like that. I can see a scenario where that works. I just don't think it's going to be that commonplace. I do like Peyton Barber in all formats. I like Mike Evans as a GPP type of pick, but I think that if we ran it 100 times, I think more than half the time we're going to be disappointed in it. But I do think there are common scenarios where he does, grab a lot of targets, do some damage with them, maybe slip into the end zone or something like that. I think that there's a chance that happens. On the New Orleans side of things, I don't know about the secondary receivers. I would be focused completely. Everybody's going to be focused on Kamara. I think Kamara, for me personally, is a big old fade because the ownership's there. I don't think they're going to give him all of a sudden 20, 22 touches or anything like that. I think they're going to still keep him down around 15, 12 to 15 like he's always done. I think they might use the rookie Scott. I think that his popularity should come up. I think he's an intriguing GPP type pivot off of that. But I think that Kamara has to break the big play. Can he? Certainly. Tampa Bay is no good defensively, in terms of DVP or DVOA, whichever numbers you look at. But I think that what we need to do is we need to be focused a little bit more on the passing game in this one because Tampa Bay is better against the run than they are against the pass. They're very soft against the pass. And I think that, Drew, this would be, if they still are a run-first offense in New Orleans, I think this is a week where we might not see that. I think we might see more passing. I think that Drew Brees makes a lot of sense, even in cash. I think that Mike Thomas makes a ton of sense, especially stacked with Drew Brees. I don't know that Kamara makes a ton of sense. I think that Benjamin Watson as the tight end makes some sense as some form of a correlation play with Drew Brees. I think those are where I'd focus. I don't know that I'd focus too much on Ginn. I don't know that I'd focus too much on a Cam Meredith type. Maybe deep GPP shots. I mean, of course, that's my hedge for everything. I'm going to tell you because, broken plays do happen and Ginn can go long and get loose and get one, especially against a defense like this that isn't very good against the pass. But I just think that the safer play with safety and upside is Mike Thomas, Drew Brees, maybe some Benjamin Watson for fairly cheap if you're getting off of a Gronkowski, which, speaking of which, next game, I also think the New Orleans Saints defense is in big-time play. When you've got a turnover-prone Fitztragic and you've got a 20-point total and the home team is big-time favored to where that suggests that the game should be pretty much out of hand at the end and Tampa Bay's going to have to be throwing it. They're going to be throwing it into New Orleans. And I will also say, high-scoring games don't mean that the defense is going to give up a lot of points. Again, and wreck your fantasy week. What it typically means is the ball's in the air a lot. And when the ball's in the air a lot, you're going to want somebody like New Orleans, who I think had the third most interceptions in the league last year, or takeaways. And if that's the case, then New Orleans is in a prime spot, and they're not being talked about too heavily. I think people are kind of considering them, but I don't think anybody's really on them as chalk. Now, I'm not going to necessarily use them in cash. I think Baltimore's the defense, but I will be considering New Orleans for tournament lineups, or maybe a hedge type of cash lineup. I might do something like that. Now, when I look at the next game, New England at Houston. Really, really simple. This game is supposed to be high scoring. I don't think Houston's defense is very, very good. I think that New England's going to do most of the scoring. You can see with the 28 and three-quarter point implied team total here in the 6.5 point spread. The thing is, with the New England offense, we don't know who the running backs are going to be on any given week. Yeah, we can pin it down to maybe Burkhead, maybe James White, who I tend to like a little bit more because I think everybody's going to be on Burkhead. And Tom Brady loves to throw and spread the wealth. And so if they split James White out in the slot a little bit or run some dump off type passes to him in the backfield, I think that he's got a good chance at doing exactly what Burkhead does, but with the lower ownership. So I like that pivot. I don't know that I trust Burkhead for cash, certainly this week. I do trust Chris Hogan. I certainly trust Gronkowski. I think those are the bigger factors, and I think Tom Brady's going to have a very, very solid game. And Tom Brady can go for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns and win GPPs too, even at the $8,000 price tag or whatever he's sporting this week. So that's a spot that I like. I would take mix and match a whole bunch of combinations out of that New England offense, but I would not trust their running backs in cash games. This is about the cheapest you're going to find Gronkowski too. So you're ever going to pay up. Houston got demolished by tight ends last year. Gronkowski does the demolishing on everybody. So, and he's healthy to start the season. I think that he's in a great spot, and I think he might be the #1 pick out of that offense, other than Tom Brady running a stack together. I think is great. You want to run it back against a Houston player or two. Don't opt for DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins is going to be who Belichick schemes against and takes away. If you're going to run it back against somebody, you can get a little bit crazy with a Will Fuller. You can get hella crazy with the tight end. Is it Ryan Griffin or whatever? You can get hella crazy with that. And those would be who I'd run. You take long shot GPP flyers on Deshaun Watson. Fine. I mean, a guy can score with anybody. You might even stack him with a Fuller or something. I don't know that I'd stack him with Nook because I believe that that's who Belichick's going to take away. And Belichick's very, very good at suppressing the top producer in the opponent offense, in the opposing team's offense. That's just what Belichick does. Don't need to spend a lot of time on that game. I'll tell you what, let me remind you again, if you're still with me, 30 minutes in, I appreciate it. I'll speed up and get out of here since we got the big games going out of the way. I need to remind you to become a VIP at dfsarmy.com. Go down to the comments section, click the link if you want this type of coaching, want this type of content. I do some free stuff, of course, with you guys, and I do some private stuff with my VIPs, and I'm always talking and always conversing in our Slack channels when guys are asking questions about this play, that play, this play, that play, where sometimes I do show a little bit more number knowledge than I'm doing right now because I don't have the numbers directly in front of me. So if you want a little bit deeper information, you're going to have to become a VIP. We've got 20 coaches, 40 on staff. We've got over 1,500 members constantly talking. Right now, we're all talking football, but we've also got tennis and MMA and NASCAR, PGA, MLB. All these sports are all covered. We're going to kick off NBA and NHL in October, just like everybody else. It's a phenomenal place with optimizers and customizable tools. You've seen the research station flashed sometimes before. You need to grab the controls of that instead of being kind of victim to where I decide to go, what I decide to show you. You want to grab the controls yourself by hitting the link in the comment section, dfsarmy.com. Use coupon code CHOP, C-H-O-P, and become a VIP. Let's dive back in to Tennessee and Miami. There's a couple of sneaky plays I like here. I can't really quantify how much because they're not necessarily on my core, but they're definite GPP type picks. I see one cash play here in Delaney Walker on the Tennessee side of the ball because Miami again got trashed by tight ends. He's as steady as they come. He's like the Al Horford of the NFL in that I don't know how much I'm going to actually use him at $6,900 because I would drop down to a Kyle Rudolph or somebody to save some money if that's what I want to do. I would have to make a very, very intentional game plan to run Delaney Walker in some of my lineups or use an optimizer where I can control player exposures. We do that. DFS Army does that too. But you click on a minimum exposure of 25% and just force his ass into some of those lineups, and that would be a way to do it. And I might play with that a little bit later in the week. But as of right now, where I'm kind of hand building combinations, he's still the forgotten man, and he is ridiculously cash safe. and ridiculously a ceiling tester this week, if you will, against a bad tight end defense in Miami. Really like Delaney Walker. Not so big on Derrick Henry. Not so big on Dion Lewis. I think Dion Lewis would be the player I would use, especially over on DraftKings, if I was going to, get off of some of the cheaper running backs as a pivot of sorts. But I don't know how he's going to be used right now. I don't know if he's, how Derrick Henry's going to be used right now. I don't know how any of the receivers are going to be used. So I don't really like the setup so much. Over on the Miami side of things, Kenyon Drake, I mean, being the underdog again and a 21-point total implied, I don't know that that's an exciting spot for them. I don't know, the whole wide receiver core just not enticing me outside of one play over there, and that's Danny Amendola. I think Danny Amendola is a smart pivot off of Keelan Cole. I think that Danny Amendola is healthy. I think for now. I think that he is proven to be sneaky and slippery in coverage. I think he can run some short routes in the slot, go across the middle, has the footwork to get open and get separation. I think that he slips into the end zone if they're inside their red zone. I think he finds a way to kind of break coverage and get into spots in the end zone where he can be found. Now, do I think he's got 2 TD potential? Not necessarily, but I think he's pretty cheap, and I think that the guy could easily get 6, 7, 8, 9 targets this week and wind up maybe falling into the end zone or accumulating 60 to 80 yards or so, which is a fine floor for cash games. But I do think he has at the price, I think he has the upside to go for bigger and maybe end up on a GPP type of lineup, a winning type of lineup, as the value play there, especially at a little bit lower ownership. I just think that's a smart thing to consider. LA Chargers, Kansas City is the other bigger game on the slate. We'll blow through the others pretty quickly. 3-point favorite out there in LA. I want to keep saying San Diego. I just was, golly, 40 years of habits are hard to break. Kansas City goes out to visit a division rival. I will say this. Kansas City is interesting. They've got a lot of weapons. Andy Reid's going to be calling the plays again. And Andy Reid tends to forget about his most important people at weird times. This is a week one. I don't know that with a couple weeks to prepare that he's going to. I think I can expect a good game out of Kareem Hunt, out of Travis Kelce, out of Sammy Watkins maybe, out of some of the guys they have over there in that offense. I think we're in good spots, good positions. But I wonder about there is that risk that Andy Reid's going to forget them. I wonder about Mahomes and being a rookie. And I know he's got a big arm, but I wonder about how his ball control is going to be. He's not Alex Smith, obviously, not supposed to be. So I would have more GPP type reservations on Kansas City. Don't know if they're going to make my core for cash game consideration, but they're definitely all in play for defense. Over on the other side of the ball, I don't know why people are down on Phillip Rivers. I think he's a solid cash game consideration at quarterback this week. Not on Antonio Gates, not on Keenan Allen, believe it or not, because Kansas City has held that guy down. They have schemed against him very well. I think the guy that gets loose in that offense and has a potentially big game is Tyrell Williams, because Kansas City gets burned by the deep ball. They get burned by blown coverages. That's just how their defense has its holes, and I think that Tyrell Williams can exploit that. And I think that Melvin Gordon's in a pretty good spot. Now, cash safe spot, maybe, but I'm not 100% sure and how that game's really going to play out. It looks like the Chargers should be running the ball all game long. But for some reason, Gordon and some of the murmurs around the industry has me kind of wondering. I like the guy. I think he gets all of the red zone work, gets a lot of carries inside the 5-yard line. I think that he's a little bit touchdown dependent, though, which would put him more on FanDuel than DraftKings or Fantasy Draft. If I was going to use him in cash games, that's where it would be. But being that the Pittsburgh backup Connor is shaping up to be one of the spots I lock in, I probably would take Alex Collins for a little bit cheaper, a Leonard Fournette for a little bit more expensive. I'd probably take those guys over Melvin Gordon, but Melvin Gordon might be kind of next on that list. That's probably where I'd be ranking them in terms of my favoritism. Maybe a Kareem Hunt even if I wanted some more upside, something like that. Denver, Seattle, not a lot of interest in this game at all. Manuel Sanders in Denver, I think, is in a good spot. I don't like anything else. Doug Baldwin's not 100%, says he won't be all year. Russell Wilson's a neat GPP play, but I don't think he's cash safe going into Mile High. I don't think either defense is exactly what it used to be. I know Seattle's is not. If you look in the hyper simple breakdown videos that I did, I think you'll find that Denver's in a good spot based on the low total and being a favored home defense. I think Denver's a great GPP type of defense, but I do think that there's a lot more risk there with them than, say, even a Pittsburgh Steelers, type of offense. I think I'd rather run Minnesota. I'd rather run New Orleans than maybe even the Chargers rather than Denver. But I think Denver's in play. Scrolling past that, Carolina, not on this game at all. Ezekiel Elliott, of course, GPP pivot. Cam Newton, of course, GPP winner. Maybe Greg Olsen, GPP type of play. But I think that's about it. This game is really just relegated to GPP picks. Arizona, Washington, much the same. Pick'em game, 22 points apiece. Sam Bradford, I guess he's okay, but I don't trust him like I would trust a Brady or a Breeze or, some of those other Phillip Rivers even type of quarterbacks. To Kirk Cousins. I probably won't be on Sam Bradford, even in GPPs. Won't be on Alex Smith. I think he goes back to his ball control type crap without the Mahomes pushing behind him to force him to throw the ball down the field. It puts Jamison Crowder maybe in play. Think that Jamison Crowder might be an interesting pick. I think he's got a decent floor. I don't know how high his ceiling is against Arizona. But, I'll do some more digging on that one maybe. I think Larry Fitzgerald's in a great spot. I think David Johnson's going to get a ton of workload. I think that the tight end, is it Ricky Seals-Jones or is it Austin Seferian-Jenkins? One of the two, the ASJ or RSJ type acronym tight ends. I think we need to dig in a little bit deeper there because I don't think Washington's particularly good against the tight end. I think Jordan Reed's overpriced, washed up. I don't think that Jordan Reed is going to have other than a few good games on the year. I think he's a concussion away from retirement, and I'm not taking the chance on that, being that could happen on the second play of the game with a guy whose head is just super soft right now. And I apologize to the guy for that. I don't wish injury on anybody. I'm just saying it scares me going into the game. It's kind of where I'd really be interested in Larry Fitzgerald above all of them. David Johnson's more of a GPP type of pivot for me. I think he's going to get the workload just fine. I just think Alex Collins and the backup in Pittsburgh, and even a Fournette, I think are just in a little bit better spots, a little bit more secure workload. I can't believe I'm saying that about David Johnson, but I am. Green Bay, Chicago on the night slate. Aaron Rodgers, of course, probably in play. Trey Burton over on the other side of the ball is in play. Jimmy Graham's in play. I don't see a lot else that I'd be too terribly interested in. You got a low total and a home defense with a big point spread favoring them in Green Bay. Green Bay defense is obviously in play against Chicago. Hope I'm not leaving anybody out there that's too important. On the Monday night games, New York Jets and Detroit, that's kind of a puke game. But if you're running the 425 slate, this 6-game slate, 3 games here, 3 games here, the Sunday, Monday type slate, I think that Matt Stafford's in play if you're not using Aaron Rodgers. I think on a 6-game slate, Aaron Rodgers is going to be hard to fit. You may have to drop down to a Matt Stafford. I think that's where I would use him. Gosh, I'm not really seeing a lot else other than, again, low total, 18.5 out of the Jets on the road, turnover prone, of course. I think that the Detroit defense is strongly in play along with Green Bay on that slate. Not really using them much on the Thursday through Monday slate. I might use some Jets, but like a Quincy Enunwa, Robbie Anderson in a tournament type of lineup situation. Not really on that game, though. You got the road underdog at a low total under 18. That speaks well for garbage type, so Enunwa and Robbie Anderson should be in play. I need to stand corrected there. I don't know if I'm going to bump them up to like one of the top 5 or 6 receivers that I reach for, but I would put them in the mix, certainly for GPPs. LA Rams and Oakland, I think that for sure Todd Gurley's in play. I think Jared Goff might be another quarterback of consideration on that 6-game slate. Certainly the later 3-game slate that would feature the Sunday night game and then the 2 Monday night games. Looking around, Cooper Kupp maybe. I don't know about Robert Woods. Don't know about Brandon Cooks until I see it, but I think Brandon Cooks is always in play. 6-game slate might not be terrible. If we looked at, say, Oakland and saw what Chucky's been doing over there, not sure I like anything. Marshawn, I'm just here so I don't get fined. Lynch is probably in play. I don't know that I want to take a Derek Carr or an Amari Cooper or anybody like that. Rams defense is pretty good. 22.5 point total I'm looking at. I think I'd focus on Rams. So if I'm covering the 6-game slate here, which I'm going to do for my VIPs maybe later, it's going to be a little tough because it doesn't look like we're going to have a lot of cheaper ancillary pieces. It looks like we're going to have to take the Rams, Gurley for sure as chalk. Second running back, David Johnson in play. He would be an interesting pivot off of Gurley at lower ownership if you could find a second running back to run. Maybe Christian McCaffrey. He's going to be pretty expensive on that slate. Denver, Seattle, maybe Chris Carson. Um, Maybe Royce Freeman. Those are risky plays. Ezekiel Elliott's a great one that's going to be overlooked for 6-game tournaments. If you want to run some 1,200 man or 3,500 man GPP type thing, Ezekiel Elliott might be an intriguing play there. Jamison Crowder, Trey Burton, those types. I'm trying to think of where I'm going to end up. I'd like to get Aaron Rodgers as the safest quarterback on the slate, but he might end up falling to a little bit lower ownership on that slate because he's just so damn hard to get. You might have to settle for a Goff or a Bradford or something like that. So anyway, that's going to wrap up the slate breakdown. It's 45 minutes long. Hopefully we make them a little bit faster going forward, but there was a lot to talk about. It's week 1. Come back, become a VIP. ChopTalk. DFSArmy.com. Coupon code CHOP, C-H-O-P. 10% off savings. Unlock all of the pricing, all content tools, optimized lineups, and the coaching to help teach you how to use these tools. Come back and see us. We'll be back in another day or two, and we'll be doing baseball, of course, for the rest of the week. And we're going to be talking NFL all week leading up to locks. So come back, take care. You'll see updates in Sunday for VIPs. Thanks for tuning in. We will catch you guys later.